I would say before Christ, my life was reckless. I was in a relationship with the Don's daughter. So I held him at gunpoint and was hauling him off a building.
What?
Yeah. The only thing I really feared is my mother. My father, there are times when I had to threaten to murder him. I used to turn up to ISAF and rob the offering,
That's good. His transformation from being in gang life to now being a pastor, having written a book.
After Christ, my life is passionate about purpose. I got saved, gave my life to the Lord on the 14th of May, 1977. I felt like something fall off of me. Actually, I thought it was my clothes. Then I heard a voice in my head said, if you sin, you need to walk away from it. When I applied to go to Bible school, the person who interviewed me said to me, you are not going to make it here. Some of you are at a place where you feel this empty, you feel this need, and really God calling you. I said, what? You have been doing that to me for a while. So I don't have any problem believing that God is invisible enough and that He's real enough. Because the fact of the matter is, everybody have a whole heap of things that is invisible and real. The thing literally ate my manuscript and I had it no more. A church should be best known by its sending capacity, not just its seating capacity.
Open Chxt Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to another powerful episode of Open Chxt Podcast. You know that we have conversation about real things. And it's not no scapegoat type of thing. It's about transformation, change, love, relationship. If it's difficult, if it's easy, we talk about it. And today's guest, we have Reverend Osborne Bailey, where he's going to talk about his transformation from being in gang life to now being a pastor, having written a book. And the book is about personal evangelism, resharpening the edge of the church, Evangelistic sword. And this is a conversation about second chances, divine purpose, and the mission every believer carries. Sir Osborne Bailey, welcome to Open Chxt Podcast.
Hey, my pleasure to be here with you, Chad. How you doing?
I'm fine, and how are you?
I'm great. God has been good to me.
It's really a pleasure having you on this show, sir. As a lot of y'all don't know that he's my pastor. We have a lot of history. He guides me in whatever circumstances, and he's really a good friend.
Yes, I was hoping you'd say that.
So, sir, we are going to go into the world of preaching and the gospel to all creation. But before we do that, we are going to start the show with a Bible verse. And today's Bible verse comes from Mark 16, verse 15. Go into all the world and preach the gospel of all creation.
Yes, that's a great commission.
And this verse is really going to frame the conversation going forward, and you will see why that Bible verse was chosen. And Sir Bailey, let's start from the beginning. Tell us about your early years. What was it like growing up in your neighborhood of Pineland Avenue?
Well, it's interesting, because I was born in the 60s, but grew up in the 70s.
Okay.
And that was, I termed that the last good breed of Jamaicans, where you could go to your bed in the inner cities, no burglar bars, your windows open. People were respectful in Kingston. We're talking about country.
Yeah.
And I was alive when my parents had to say it's time to close the windows because people were passing by. They were not marching with sticks again, or for that matter machetes. They were now marching with guns. And we were actually born in Rosestown, that was off Spanish Town Road. And when things got what we thought was too hot in Rosestown, then we moved to Payne Avenue, which at that point we felt was a kind of community where it was peace and quiet. But with the uprising of politically motivated violence, the whole of Kingston and eventually all of Jamaica become immersed in a kind of do or die survival. Violence was everywhere, and it moved from just politics into all kind of social violence, domestic violence, gang violence, all different type invasion into people's lives and safety. So it is within that in the 70s, because now it was in the 70s. I lived in Payne Avenue, and that was actually where I got immersed into it. It was a survival for me. I was a Woolmerian by day, I like to say, and in the evenings, nights, weekends, I have to be protecting and defending my community, trying hard not to allow my mother to hear that I was involved in anything, because she was still then, the only Don I really respected. She made sure that everybody, all of us understood in the house that she is the Don of the house, just by the respect she commanded, mind you, because she was only 5 feet 4, 3 or 4. We were now 6 feet, but she was someone to be respected. And it's out of that I end up encountering Christ. I could share that with you.
But before we head into that, at what age did you get involved in gang violence?
Well, perhaps I was about 13, 14. So what was happening is when I moved to Payne Avenue, because I had a high school initiation, kind of level of being able to articulate and to manage myself in a conversation.
Yeah.
I was immediately seen as someone who would, as I grew older, would be able to take on certain role in the community.
Okay.
Also, I was in a relationship with the Don's daughter at that time as a boy.
Mhm.
And hence I had access to his house, and by virtue of that, I had, kind of gained the kind of respect. Mind you, all of this had to be going on without my mother, the Don's knowledge. Because I was really concerned about her getting any knowledge or information that I was gravitating towards that kind of a lifestyle, gun and so on. So from that early age, I was exposed to people carrying weapons, organizing themselves to defend the community, and really learning to be identified as someone to be respected and so on. And that road gets very, very downhill very fast.
So what were you looking for? What was the purpose? Was it really protection you were searching for? Why you gravitated to the gang?
Well, initially, you like the attention that you would get, because you are seen. Imagine you just come in as a little boy and you get risen to a level of respect. So you like that kind of thing. You like the fact that you could command attention from certain citizenry there, the ladies,
Okay.
You like that. You like the idea that one day they start to pitch it toward you. You could become leader. You could be someone who could influence. In my mind then, I had both good and bad intent. I had the intent that I was in charge. Everybody would see me as the king and don, whatever they call it then. But I also had in my back of my head the knowledge that I could use my power and authority to do some good in the community.
Okay.
So it really was for me good and bad. And then ultimately, when the war, I call it a war really, started, political war, for me it became survival, where I couldn't just allow someone to be defending the community and I would just sit back and be defended.
Okay.
So in the day I would have to go to school, because those are my mother's rules. And mine too, they better become mine, because I tell her she was really someone who commanded authority. But then in the evenings and weekends, I have to defend myself, and defend yourself mean from time to time you'll be armed. Those days M16s are very rare. You would be armed with an handgun. 9mm was very rare at the time. So it was some form of there were some automatics, handgun, there were 6-shooters largely. But you had to, if you were going to defend, protect, watch community, you had to be armed. And it's a kind of situation, there were a pool of guns at the time, and you get one to use. If you use it long enough, it becomes what is called yours, but it's not yours. And if you're going to leave, like when I became a Christian and decided I'm done here, you turn over back their things and make it clear to them you're no longer walking that road.
So What was the hardest part of being in that life? Were you ever afraid, or did it become something that became the norm?
All right, to be honest with you, it's interesting, and I look back at it. I'm more afraid now that I was in it than when I was there, because to me, I could give a number of reasons now, especially since I'm also trained as a psychologist, why I wasn't afraid. But I wasn't afraid then, because you feel the sense of you are invincible, you're
powerful.
calculated. I was not one who was just acting because I was angry. I had my head screwed on. I didn't like a gang, even though I was in a group, I call it, but I didn't like a gang. I like to do what I was doing by myself. If I had anything to do, anywhere to go, I would try to go by myself. So there's been nobody to report me, nobody to hear that I did or saw that I did. Police could not pick up anybody and then they would give information about me, because that I hardly would go with anybody to do anything. So I'd be hanging out with them, generally laughing, playing football, because that was kind of, for me, the daily cover. You play football like everybody else, you go to school, but then when you get into the other character, I would be doing it by myself, doing it as stealthily as I could and as I can, and with the aim so that you get the message. I don't have to keep coming back. When I turn up, I do my thing. Hardly anybody to say I was there, and it was, for me, not something I was afraid of. I just basically, when I look back at the danger, know that most of my friends are in that age have either died, or in gun court, or some lock up, or as old than my age. I'm 65 next month, and I don't know where they are. I don't know what they have achieved. That is when I now look back at that year and say, man, that was scary to have run those kind of risks, live that kind of life. I have passed people on the streets that I grew up with that was feared then. They were terrible, dangerous people. And I've seen them on the streets now because their lifestyle was not sustainable. So I'm scared now thinking about what that could have been me.
I can understand where you're coming from, because probably being in the situation, as I say, you felt powerful, having a gun, having the girls, the respect that you needed. You didn't feel like anything could happen to you, but the reflection of it now, you say, but anything could have happened, and I would have been dead.
The only thing I repeat it, and if I don't say it often enough, it should be said every time I open my mouth. The only thing I really fear is my mother. Right?
It sounds like a lot of gunman.
I did not want my mother to hear or know that I was involved. Right? Because it would just break her heart. And so I tried everything in my powers to make sure I operated in such a way that even if she heard something, she would say, no, sir, that can't be true.
That can't be you.
Right. So it was actually when my cover started to be blown out, then I realized that I started to feel what perhaps you could call some type of fear or concern, because I had the deepest of respect for my mother. Yeah.
So where was Daddy in all of this?
Well, my father at that point at time of my life was really an antagonist. I'm careful because now I have the deepest of respect for my father. Okay. Why? Because at the time, because of his upbringing, he was literally a war between he and me. A kind of war where it is, literally a war. There are times when I had to threaten to murder him or to do him harm or to literally, he became conscious or careful how he dealt with me because I was just not the kind of person he would run the kind of risk with. He would be abusive of my mother when I was small, but when I got to a certain age, I had to kind of make it clear to him that that is done and, it's not going to happen under my watch. And so because for some reason, though, he at that point didn't know how concerned he should be as a result of me, but he just heard it in my tone, saw it in the kind of affirmation that I brought to what I say. Yes, my demeanor, that he kind of recognized that perhaps I need to be careful around me, right? And I remember one night in particular when we kind of drew a line in the sand where he literally who tried to do something to embarrass me. I'd come late from a dance, like 3 o'clock in the morning, and he had that, well, the audacity to ask me where I was coming from. At that stage, I thought he was bright, you know. Mind you, I was just like 15 or 16. And he and I got into a tussle, and I literally at that night had to make it clear as day to him that the days of me running from him and so on done tonight. And after tonight, he has to be careful about any one of those attacks against anybody in the house that I didn't like, that I would not approve of.
So where were your other sibling in all of this at the time?
At the time, I lived with a sister, my two brothers, and that's for the most part. It was one of those houses that people, family come and go from time to time, but those were the general living. At that time, my brother and I had a different hustle. Right now, I would consider my brother my friend. And someone I look up to and really respect. But at that time, there was a lot of reasons why we didn't say eye to eye, because he had his thing, I had my thing. In fact, when he got saved before me, one of the most tragic experiences I've had is him wake me up in the middle of I call it the middle of the night, about 5 o'clock, to invite me to his baptism. I really had to ask him if it's serious. To wake me up 5 o'clock or maybe 6 o'clock to go church. I said, man.
They said church was the last thing on your mind.
Last thing on my mind, church. Wake me up that time to go to church. A baptism of all the things. What's a baptism? So I thought he was very brave, or he had found something that was worthwhile knowing that I did not know at the time.
So now you actually bring the conversation where I wanted to go. Where was the turning point for you that you realized that Christ is the way to go?
Well, let me tell you, I got saved, gave my life to the Lord on the 14th of May, 1977. About 10:30. I know the time too. About 10:30 the Saturday morning. What was happening? Prior to that, remember I told you I was in a relationship with the Don's daughter. I had a run-in with somebody who she was more in a relationship more than me because I was in one with her, but clearly she was someone else. So I turned up the evening and saw them doing their thing, and so I held him at gunpoint and was hauling him off a building.
What?
Yeah. And then a member of the community came, a lady, and saw me with the gun in my hand, tried to wrestle the gun from me. So, I couldn't allow that to happen. So, I gun butt her. And then, of all the things she threatened to do, more than anything else, 2 things she threatened to do. One was to report me to the police. That was bad. You know the next thing, right? To report me to my mother. To the Don.
You're done.
She threatened to report me to my mother. So at that stage of the game, I was running because I was afraid that police could pick me up at any time. Because those days in the 70s, if they found you with one gunshot or even a weapon, you're going to go life in prison at gun court. And so I was hiding from them. I was very careful. Clandestinely, I'd go to school, but come home late, and on weekends I had to find somewhere to go. But I was so embarrassed that my mother, no, I couldn't face her. So I would take to go to church on Saturdays. I wasn't worried about church being long like most people would, because the longer I stayed, the better I felt. So it was while hiding in church. I saw all kind of things. I saw, I heard preaching. I saw what was then miracles that I thought was a joke. But I saw worship. That's what another thing that moved me. I saw people genuinely worshiping, and I knew that they were in touch with something that I didn't know anything about. And then that struck up a search in my spirit. And one day I was there saying there has to be more to just come in here and watching people. And believe it or not, both inside of me and a voice coming from the platform explain that some of you are at a place where you feel this empty, you feel this need, and it's really God calling you. I said, what? He has been doing that to me for a while.
So that was your first spiritual encounter?
It was my first real spiritual encounter. As I said, over the time I hear in the voices and something starts to say something more was necessary from your life. But on that day, when they made it very clear what was missing, I decided that I'm leaving my old life behind. And so I got up. They made an altar call if you want to change. And I got up, consciously got up and walked to the front. And when I was halfway up from where the stage was to where I was, I felt like something fall off of me. Actually, I thought it was my clothes. And I initially was bombarded with a sense of being embarrassed about being naked. And when I looked down, I saw that I still had on my clothes. And I looked behind me because I said, I know something fell off. And then I heard a voice in my head says, it's a sin, you need to walk away from it. And I just kept on walking. So by the time I had gotten to the altar where they were standing, I had already surrendered my life to the Lord and decided my life was never going to be the same. 14th of May, 1977, 10:30 that Saturday morning, I decided my life was never going to be the same.
That was powerful. I think the thing that surprised me is the thing in your spirit when you said you felt like something fell off you, but you felt naked.
Yes.
And you realize that, no, it's probably just your sin, the weight and the stuff that was in your mind is no longer there.
No longer there. And throughout this interview, that was my first, but I've had some encounters with God in ways that I try not to make. I'm not any special for having those. But I would have had some encounter with God that are very unique, where he would have spoken some things directly to me and would have given me some wisdom. So on the Sunday morning when I woke up, I didn't have any church to go, because this was a group of church people who used to gather at the Pegasus Hotel, the charismatic movement, right? And Deeper Life Ministries and so on. And the Sunday morning, I didn't have any church to go, because I didn't get saved in what you call a church, And this, sure enough, a voice, I believe to be the devil, turn up and say, "Oh, you call yourself Christian, and Sunday morning you're not in church." And something came to me then and there that has been coming back to me since, even with the writing of these books, to say to him, why is it you're just coming today to tell me I am not Christian? Why never come yesterday when I was not a Christian? Clearly, you know that something happened to me yesterday, even deeper than I realized happened to me. That is why you're coming now. And clearly, you don't want me to continue this thing. That is why you're coming to discourage me. And I smile, because that sense of not being sure that I am saved left me from that day, the second day.
So first you had an encounter with God, and the next time when you turn up to this event, you have an encounter.
No, it was not the event. I was at home, because this was now the Sunday right after the Saturday when I had surrendered. And then I was not at church. I was at home. I mean, I don't think anybody even knew at that time what had happened to me. I was contemplating, what am I going to do with the weapon I had? Of course, I know what I'm going to have to do with the weapon I had. Turn it back in. But at that point, I was trying to work out, what am I going to do? Remember, I had a number of things to sort out now, to sort out, what am I going to do with all those women? To just decide and there, do I call a meeting? Do I just, have a one-off, just call the main one and let them tell, I just decide that. What I'm going to do with the gang, I don't even like to call them a gang, the group that I was in with the gun thing, and so on. What am I going to tell my school friends? Give you one example. When I turn up to school to tell them I was a Christian, they turn up to what's called ICF at school. They asked me to leave the meeting, because first thing, they know me as a liar, but this is the worst lie they ever hear me tell. It's to talk about I am saved, because they say people like you cannot get saved overnight. And when I say I got saved, I went to this meeting Saturday, and I gave myself to the Lord. I'm saying you cannot get saved like that. And
so what did you experience in that moment? Was it fear or what? Because one, you say you give your life to God now. So I expect persons would have gathered around you and stuff, but instead I said, this man is a liar.
Well, at that point, I kind of understood their thing. I used to turn up to ISAF and rob the offering,
Jesus God. Oh, that
I would quote Bible verse and say the Lord said they are to give more than they receive, and the Lord loves a cheerful giver. You guys don't want God to love you clearly. For guys, stop me from going through this door they're offering. It's not only that you don't want God to love you, but try to know what you're doing, because living and life is more important than the few dollars in this offering plate.
So now you quote the Bible against them.
So no make up in the mind what I do. And of course, so usually from I'm at the door, they would just lock the door, the classroom door, so I can't come in. I had to push my way into the classroom door like bad man still.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I had time to tell them that I'd given my life to the Lord, again, I had to bad them up to give the talk to say that I was surrendered. And so it was like trying to do all, initially it started out of using force to make the point, because, the first young lady I told that I gave my life to the Lord, she did something which I thought was unfortunate. So of course, flog her with a broom. God forgive me, because I was just slowly coming into this new thing. Please, I beg you, don't judge me. It wasn't less than a week after I'd given myself to the Lord and trying to work out my salvation in my own way.
Yeah.
And it's then when I recognize I need to learn to listen to that voice that spoke to me the Sunday morning after I gave my life to the Lord, about helping me to understand that I was truly saved. And so at that point, I started to realize that there was something important about telling people about the transformation that had happened to me. And I had no shame, because as I said, the Sunday morning, I got assurance with the encounter with the devil that something had happened to me, and the only thing I could use to explain it. So back to my being rejected, I could understand I was not the nicest of persons in my community to people and so on. Nobody who knew me would want to readily say, yes, he's one of us. Right? So I understood their apprehension. I remember the first time I preached in an open air meeting in my community. People weep, because now if I was faking, I was now faking in public. Right? I remember those kind of first time decision, and first time when I said to my mother, beg your bus fare. Now she says, we're going, it's a Friday, you're not going to get yourself in trouble. And I said to her, no, Mom, I really church. I want the bus fare to go. She said, you want a bus fare to go to church on a Friday evening? I said, yeah. She said, you sure? And I mean, fastest bus fare ever say she fork up on a Friday, because Fridays when people go get themselves into trouble. And sure enough, I was going to church. And my father, who, I tell you, eventually I found out why my father was what he was, so we made peace. I led him to the Lord, actually. He was in a conversation with me, and when I told him that I was a Christian, he, of course, saw me as a liar and so on. $1 I get. So I said to him, I recognize that you more than anybody else know that I'm saved. Because before I was transformed, you couldn't box me. Right? I says, if you never sure, and the tears running down my cheek, I was the tears of joy, because I realized that I was really saved, because I know he knew more than me before I was saved. That trying to just thinking about box me, and I suspect he was having the thought, would have been dangerous. Much more box me? No, man. That man saw something that God showed him that I did not see for myself. So on that day, it instead of feeling hurt,
you feel relief.
I feel joy that the transformation was evident, so that my father could think him could unbox me.
All right, so want to backtrack a little bit. Want to go back to when you got baptized and you invited your friends to the baptism.
So by this time, I started to go to a church, because remember I wasn't saved in a church, and they decided that my growth was evident to the point where they felt I was ready to be baptized. When I told my friends at school I was going to be baptized, and said, "Which idiot church that? I could have never a sensible church decide to take up you and says, Bailey, I better some woman you see down there or something you go down there and see the people them with and try to fool them up and so on. And I told them, no man, we really get saved. And I'm serious about this relationship. So my friends at school, at Wilmer's, and we're still in a very powerful class of 77, 72 old boys association, or they're like my brothers.
Yeah.
They sent a representative, and the representative they said was a friend who and I have the same nickname. He was Bill and I was Bill. Shout out Bill if you're going to watch this. And he came to the baptism as the class rep. And when he saw me going up to testify, he stood up. And then when he saw me into the water, he folded his hand and said, this is not a joke, this is serious. And when they baptized me, he held out his head. And when I went to school the following Monday morning, he was there telling them that Bailey gone.
Done with them life then.
Yes, him dead. The Bailey I want to know don't exist no more.
Him not tell no lie.
Right? And then they started to express concern for me. How you going to manage? How you going to survive? Because remember, I had a thriving survival business. What was that? I would take people's lunch money to buy a lunch for them at the canteen, and I'd go steal the lunch at the canteen. So
What? How that work?
A business, I would go to the canteen, take 3, 4, 5 boys' money, say I will join the line for you and buy your lunch. I'd go to the canteen, steal 3, 4, 5 boys' lunch, sneak out the line, and then, that money would now become mine to survive.
On the food.
No man, it's their food, but it's my money, because me steal my lunch too, so me good, And then worse, Chad, the lady, one of the ladies in the canteen, saw me and went to report me to the principal that she saw me with her own 2 eyes stealing food from the canteen. So of course, I said, I can't afford to make the principal, to take it serious. And that man couldn't believe, he knows lie from truth like that. So I went to the bathroom, practiced how to lie. And went to him and told him the lady is a liar. He fired the lady.
My God.
Then in my preaching life, I went to a church in Jonestown to preach. And as I was going to get up to go to the platform, why is he sit down in the congregation? The lady sat there and, she first of all, sit like, this and praising God. And when I went up to preach, she just turned around and fold her legs and just fold her hand like say, no words out of her mouth, but I could read that thing. If you think you're bad, preach up there. So I got up and I said, I'm in church and I just want to testify something. I was a little boy. I used to steal food at the canteen in Wolmer's. And I remember there was a lady who worked at the canteen and I told a lie and she was fired from the school. And she was not lying. It was true. But I thank God Jesus set me free. And the lady is sitting right there so in the congregation. And I apologized to her profusely and made it clear that my life is now changed. I hardly had to preach the morning. Just the testimony was enough to send the church into a space in the spirit that preaching was easy that morning. And so it was from then on I decided that look, my life cannot be the same, but my passion all along was to share the word and to evangelize and to tell other persons about my experience. But I have to quickly tell you this. Okay. So I never did religious education in school. Because the person who would decide when you get to fourth form what you do was the religious education teacher. She would sit and we would join a line and would come and she ask you what you want to be. And based upon what you tell her, she would go tell you to do RE, religious education, or TD, technical drawing. So when I sat before her, she said to me, what do you want to be? I said, I want to be a pastor, a person. And she says, go to TD. She said, go and go to TD. I don't want you in my class. You're pure trouble from ICU and so on. So I never did anything religious in education in school other than when you get to third form, and then that was it. And thrown out of ICF, did not do. So when my friends who came to Covenant, where I pastor Covenant Life Christian Church, they said Miss Hudson should be alive to see you.
You say you call the pastor thing from then and now you
Yes, I
become.
told her, oh, I'm your pastor. She said,
Why
I don't
this
want you in my class because I'm not clearly your trouble.
the story just following the line exactly how I outline it because now I'm going to transition. At what point did you decide that you wanted to be a pastor?
Well, so my pastor experience, I started feeling a call from God, a serious call. Because shortly after I got saved, I went to church. I mean, let's say I wasn't saved in a church. So I started going to church. And there was this desire for me to record, write down in an exercise book at the time, scripture verses, and to build capacity in myself to share these verses,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
no intent for pastoring. And a couple of times when the pastor was getting up in age, did not come. I found out that the little by little, my own brothers and sisters in church felt that I should take over the Bible study and so on. So I kind of sensed that they knew something was happening. But then the actual call now came. One night I told her that I would have heard from God in many instances which are unusual and difficult to explain. And I don't intend to be in argument with anybody. I have to just speak to my experience. So one night I was at an all-night prayer meeting, yes, all night. And I heard a voice literally calling my name. And I said to the person beside me who was praying, one of Jamaica's known brand name evangelist, Julius Query, I touched him and said, "You're calling me?" And he says, "No." And the second time when I was about to do it, I remember the passage in scripture where Samuel was called similarly. So I said, I recognize who it is. And then he told me that he had called me to preach the gospel. There was a problem though, because I had then applied to go to UA, and I was working at the university hospital, which would then qualify me with 5 GC, which I finally managed to get. Because after I became a Christian, because I was wasting my time in school, I had only gotten 2. So I had to, on my own, struggle till I got 5 for a couple of years, or 2 years. And then had applied for a UA, and they turned me down. And I laughed because as a member of staff at the university hospital, I know I could just take my letter of application and they're refusing me and my 5 subjects and appeal and would have gone through. So I was on the bus heading there to appeal with a laughter. I heard a voice again saying to me, they're not the ones who turn you down, it's me turning you down because I want you to go to Bible school and to give your life to ministry and so on. That was about December. I got saved the 14th of May. That was about sometime in December of that year I started Sense. And then over time now, I decided that this is where I would want to do. So I resigned I was struggling before I resigned my job, because I was one of those helping to support my parents. And then at one stage when I said to God, the last reason why I cannot go is because who is going to support your parents? I told him many times, he would say to me. So he said to me, if you feel you can support your parents more than me, then don't bother go to Bible school, stay and support them on your own. Now, with that kind of talk to me, I said to him, you never really need to talk to me like that.
You say my talk to you rough.
Yeah, there's no need to do that because I see the logic. You're saying, if I go to Bible school, you will take care of them. So I said, fine, if that is the deal. And we could talk about just those many other occasions. At the time when he said to me, I was in a bus coming from school, and he said to me, get up and preach in this bus. So I look around because I said, it could never be me. And whoever was in the bus talking to anybody, it's not me. And then he says, it's you. So I said to him, you don't see how much people on the bus. I'm sure you can find somebody else other than me who have never preached before to preach on the bus. He says, I am calling to do it. I says, it's not going to happen now. He said, well, I would not advise you to try to get off this bus and don't preach. So I says, it's like, in my language, then I would shock. But what I really meant is really that so far you're going to take it. Like if I try to come off the bus and don't preach, it'll make something happen to me. And he went silent. And I said to myself, I just going to get up and just preach and cut off of this bus because I don't want to know what happened if I get off the bus. But surprisingly, I felt this peace. Like this is where I should be.
So based on what I'm picking up, throughout those early journey, you were questioning your worthiness to lead based on the instruction that God gave you. Because you're like, I can't me attack.
Well, it is a number. You're right questioning, but when you look at where you're coming from, when you look at some of the struggle you would have had to explain where you're coming from, remember, I'm coming from a place where if I was to apply for a job, I had to get somebody else's address because I couldn't put my Payne Avenue address.
Wrong address.
How are you going to validate yourself? I'm coming from an era where I have been in meetings where people would have looked at Payne Avenue when I'm in a bus or driving with them and says, the people that come from over that community is no good. They have nothing to offer to the society and so on. When I applied to go to Bible school, when I went to the interview to go, the person who interviewed me said to me, you are not going to make it here because of where you came from. Everybody who come from where you come from, who come up here, fail the courses. So with that kind of a perspective coming at me, it was frightening,
Yeah.
Remember I wasn't even 20 years at the time when I became a Christian, and by the time I responded to the call, fully responded and now applied. I was perhaps in my 20 or 21 or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? So I felt that there was going to be challenge. And so I always have to be, that's why I spend all of this time in prayer meeting, all night prayer meeting, anywhere, because I knew the only way I was going to get through some of the challenges, over some of the hurdles that I would have to cross, is if I had the Lord with me in ways. Hence, when I tell you that he would have spoken to me in ways that is amazing, he had to, because I was always asking questions. And sometime when we get to the book, that would be how he would have guided me through some of the writing. Why I'm saying the book represents a very unique set of material that can be used for what purpose for which they were written.
So how has your personal testimony shaped your approach to pastoring or counseling?
Well,
because we probably haven't really stated this, but you are also a psychologist.
yes, I have a piece of paper that says, and I do counsel people. Right now I'm working as a psychologist. I do have a personal private practice as well as elsewhere that I do counseling psychology, right? I've lectured in many counseling psychology programs. In fact, I've never lectured in a theological program. And this is the first time I'm going to be lecturing in a theological program is this coming June. But I've always lectured in a psychology program. So the journey, for me, several things fuel the journey. One, that I want to make it clear that people who come from Nazareth kind of place can do good. When they had said to Jesus, nothing good can come from Nazareth. So I have to make sure. Secondly, I want to make sure that the less fortunate did not feel left out. And because that is where I was coming from, I could relate to that. I've preached in gun court. I've preached in GP. There's a sign when you go into GP that the only way you're going to know the sign is if you go to preach or you went in there as an inmate. When you're coming out, you will see it. I won't tell anybody, so that if you don't know the sign, you should try not to know it. Right?
So
right?
nothing good can come out.
Yes. So those are some of the things that would have driven me. Plus, there's a God who would say to me, this is what I want you to do and be. I told about the constant directing and calling and speaking to me in ways that I can just humbly be grateful for. And this need to position yourself so that God can speak to you is one which I felt I had to make sure that I was hearing from him. So no doubt there were times when I have many questions when he would have spoken. And I was not the easiest of learner either when he was teaching. But I was always willing to know and believe. So I don't have any problem believing that God is invisible, and that he's real, because the fact of the matter is, everybody have a whole heap of things that is invisible and real that them believe in. They believe in gravity. It can't be seen. They believe in consciousness. Who would want to not believe that they have a sense of consciousness? They believe in electromagnetism. They believe in electricity. These are all things that are real and invisible. So I know that my invisible God is real and that he does communicate with those of us who he wants to do and direct to do things.
What's the key thing? What's the key thing that I take out of what you just said is the word the two word I know. Because I think a lot of times when I hear people talking about God, they use the word that I hope at the end of the journey. And I'm like, how you feel hope? It sounds like you're questioning what you believe in.
I don't have that.
I never get that.
I know that God does exist.
Or they use the word if. If at the end of life, God don't exist, at least me did still believe. And I'm like, if you know that your God is real, you're supposed to say, I know, not if.
Not only do I believe is real, I believe all of life is a series of appointments. And that God reserved the right to set some of those appointments for us. And so far, some of them have already come through, so I would not want to not doubt them all. For example, he said everybody have an appointed time to be born one time. I don't know anybody who's ever been born twice. He says everybody has an appointed time to die. It's what Hebrews 9:27 says. And of course, yes, you can have gone through a situation where you died and resuscitated, but after they bury you, that's it.
You're dead.
Right? And so the same verse that says an appointed time to die says, and after that there's an appointment called judgment. Now, I know that I could not give birth to myself, so I had to need a medical practitioner for that appointment. I know I can't bury myself. I am going to need an undertaker for the second appointment. So obviously the third appointment is going to come and I'm going to need help. That is my understanding why I need a savior. I need a plan that's better than the plans that other people have. Hence my reason to be comfortable with my decision to surrender my life to Christ. For what he has done and for who he represents.
And based on that, I also have this question to follow up with that. We meet people all the time, but one of the key things that I've noticed about you is that you never shy away from telling your story to let people understand that everybody have a testimony and this testimony can draw them closer to Christ.
It's interesting that you say that because it to me is not even like a big thing. Like I'm telling a big thing.
Yeah.
And I would like to imagine it not so much my story, why I love to tell it. It is his story extended into my life.
Okay.
So the joy I have in telling it is not so much because the joy I have in telling it is because he has done this great thing in me, which I know happened, and I cannot deny that it happened. And so I end up comfortably wanting to be a witness on the case to say Christ is and has done and is willing to do into anybody who wants to surrender. So this is not just like, it's a church thing, it's a euphoric thing, it's a make noise thing, it's an emotion thing. For me, I'm saying if that was what you have been hearing all along, that this is what it is. No, it's not that. He met Paul on the Damascus Road and he met me on the 14th of May in the Pegasus Ballroom at a church type meeting, and other persons with whom he has met. And he has been speaking to us, and perhaps speaking to you listening to, but you have been doubting because of the challenges you would have had. And so I'm very comfortable being able to share his story and how it has been outworking in my life.
So let's shift gear a little bit now. We are going to head into talking about your book that you have wrote, Personal Evangelism, Resharpening the Edge of the Church's Evangelistic Sword. What inspired you to write these two books?
So these books, and I'm holding them here in my hand so that you can see them. Started out as a Bible study. I should back up and say that I was blessed to be one of the 10,000 persons invited to Amsterdam by the Billy Graham Association. And it was called the 10,000 Evangelists. How do I get into that? No one person in the world would do evangelism. Somehow somebody set down my name and felt that I was ready to go, having heard my testimony. So I went. And I came back with a passion, not just for ordinary evangelism, but for personal evangelism. I have a passion that says a church should be best known by its sending capacity, not just its seating capacity. Church should not be measured by, we have a 3,000 square foot building and we have 10,000 members and 3 services. How many of those people you can send to go and share the gospel? But more than that, how many of them can teach somebody else to go and share the gospel? Those kind of things were what began to drive me and mold me and make me very uncomfortable with just preaching and even tent and a large crusade when, of a fact, when those meetings are over, for the most part, what is left of evangelism is not what I believe God would desire. And then after COVID, I became very concerned that if the church had more a tool that would cause them to be able to sit in the living room and call people and share the gospel, then COVID would not have been a blow against the church. It would have been an advancement for the church. I also became very concerned that there was a difference between evangelizing and Christianizing. Christianizing is about telling people about church and Christ, which is wonderful. But evangelizing is sharing the story about the gospel with a view to make persons make a decision to either accept or to reject Christ. They need to be given an opportunity, having heard the gospel, to decide whether they're going to accept or to reject. And I became aware that over more than 95% of the body of Christ is not so equipped to do this. Good saved people, God-fearing, Holy Ghost-filled member of the church. I just came out of a training with about 17 to 20 leadership persons, including pastors and apostles in churches, who did not, they say it's the first time they are being exposed to the ability to sit with somebody from start to finish and to share the gospel and to lead them to a position where they make a decision to either accept or to reject.
And I think what's important based on what you just say is, for me, realize, as you said, I think people are more going for the numbers and not necessarily getting persons to understand what they are really doing. Because I realize that you go to a church, you see a whole heap of people getting into spirit, they're doing everything. But when the service done, they return to them home like nothing ever happened. So you just feel like it's a Sunday, one day thing, and that's it.
And as I said, they're good at telling people about the church and even about Jesus. But the devil knows about Jesus too. So I became very concerned that a system, a strategy, because these are people with the power of God. These are people with passion for God. We're talking about church. These are people who really have been transformed, but they just did not have a strategy. And so I began to approach God about a strategy. And these books came out of a Bible study that started in my church some 5 years ago or so, which under the heading, My Little Soul Winner's Book. That's what it was called before. And so we would print it and give it to the members, and we would practice inside, the church, and, we would try to build capacity in the church for that. And then as we started to test the sense, what purpose it served and how effective it could have been, I started to get encouraged to write it in a book. And of course, from 1 to 2. But I must tell you that when I started writing, I got up to page 90 of my manuscript. And then all of a sudden, somebody told me that I should have been using a special software that edits as I go along as a writer, and that there was a free version of a software. Well, when I installed that free version and upload my manuscript, I did not have the presence of mind to upload a copy. The thing literally ate my manuscript, and I had it no more at page 90. Everything that's left.
90 pages?
90 pages. And I literally at that time decided I was done with this project because there's no way God would have led me to write it, and I lost it. And that was when I keep telling you that God would speak to me. He said to me, you lost your book. That was not my book. I am going to help you now to write our book. So even when you said my book, I am a little uncomfortable with taking all the credit.
Can you rewrite?
Because everything is written. I had to written, and there were times when I literally heard the dictations. And he said to me, this is going to sound very churchy, but I'm speaking, I believe my heart, I'm speaking the truth. He said to me, in the spirit realm, I am going to take you into the room where Jesus and his disciples dwell when he was here, and everything he taught them, I am going to teach you. You are to write them in the book. As you are being taught, you can ask any questions. So I would be writing, when I want definitions for concepts, he would help me with definitions. When I had tough questions to ask, he would find, and I was not really interested in any just Bible verse action, responses. I want clear, practical. So many people, for example, I remember one example when I struggled with Jamaica believe that anything that is free cannot be good. And when I asked him in the meeting, how do I respond to that? Because you want me to say the gospel is free, and we know that they're going to tell me what is free not good. And he said to me, and it's written in the book, you have a heart in your chest, how much you paid for it?
Not that thing.
Right? You have fingers that you're pointing at me right now. How much you pay for one? Right? You have lungs and liver and eye. If you are to go to the doctor right now to do a simple surgery to repair or to remove or to correct any one of them, you know how much millions of dollars some of those surgery cost? How much you pay for that?
Nothing.
And I said free. And he says, well, it's long time God is giving people things free. So why come all of a sudden when it's time to give them salvation, him going to have to charge for it? That don't make no sense. And so the Spirit of the Lord was literally saying to me, nothing is wrong with being free. We are comfortable accepting all kind of things free. Especially us Jamaicans. Make a chicken truck turn over down the road and see how fast the truck gets stripped. We don't have a problem with that. It's free. But once we call God, we have a problem. The Bible says that salvation is a free gift called grace, Romans 5 verse 8. And I thank God for his free gift. Plus, it's not free, because Jesus paid for it by dying on the cross. So I know that if it cost him that much, though it's free to me, it has to have something of great value.
Can you use an example? You just use a chicken truck, look at the container.
Yeah, it can cause them problem, but they still take it.
What's in the container is free to them, you know.
Yes.
But the persons who it was supposed to ship to still had to pay
for it. Right. So I'm comfortable with those things. So we got together and we wrote the book. Now, there are two books. One of them is a manual for persons who are going to go on the road and do personal evangelism.
Okay.
And I call it a manual because literally you can turn to a section of it and just with someone sitting before you, you could just take them through the gospel. And that same manual takes you through what to do to prepare yourself to use the manual. Pictures and everything is there, right? And you notice the pictures are there that you can use in the manual. You're looking at the pocket version, which is a small summary of it that can be used to share the gospel. And this is the manual that you would take along with your Bibles, of course, but all the verses are written in there. So that with it, you don't need a Bible to use it. Okay. Because the verses are there. The ultimate aim is not to use it with a book in your hand while you're using it. It's to know it enough, because it compresses the gospel into no more than 40 verses. Full 5 points of the gospel. God is the author of the plan of salvation. Man's sin has caused a separation from between us and God. So no matter what God wants and loves and cares and wants us to become, it's hard for us to become it. And Christ died, and you can use your 5 finger. God is the author. Our sins, you see the distance here, separates us from God. Christ in the middle here died for our sins. Grace tells us that the plan is free, and this little finger tells us that you have to make a decision. And the book is built on the hand with a diagram with the 5 hand. It's called the GPS diagram, God's plan of salvation. And it is kind of making a comparison between GPS, the global positioning system that leads us to a place here on earth, while GPS, God's plan of salvation, leads us to a place with God at the end of the age. Right. So it's really a kind of a comparing that GPS. Let me see if I can find one quickly and show them the hand and the GPS diagram that speaks to it. And the entire books are built around this diagram. So this one is the one you take. And this now, if you believe that you have been led to teach somebody.
So for the audio listeners, the first one we were talking about is book 2.
Book 2, yes.
And now the manual he's referring to is now book 1.
Right. So the first one written was, but I thought I would explain book 2 first. So that, because that's what most people are going to start. I just want to do evangelism.
Okay.
Right? And you may look at the front chart and you see a picture of the Bible and the sword, because for some people, the Bible is still a book of words, but for some of us, the Bible is a serious sword we use to engage the enemy and to win victories.
And I think the Bible refers to the sword as
the
Bible.
Sword of the Spirit.
Yes.
Right, in Ephesians. Book 2 now is book 1. Book 1 is the one now that we use to teach somebody how to use book 2.
Okay.
So it is really for those who want not just to learn to evangelize, but you want to train somebody. So when you come into the church and after a while you are there as a sitting member, we're going to give you book 1 first, and of course persons in our church at this point, they are given a book 1 for free. But once you recognize and no, I am past book 1 kind of a level, I need to train somebody, then you need to get book 2, because this is now the one that you're going to use to train you to train somebody else to do the work. So they are both critical in the process, depending on where you are in your relationship with God.
Just a quick question. At what point did you, after you write the first one, that you realize that you need to create a book 2?
All right. So in my mind, all I had was a book that was about personal evangelism. Never had no book 1 or book 2. And as I was writing the book, it became clear to me. So what I started writing was just one book. But as I was writing, I realized that I had to break them out into what will help you to do evangelism and what would help you to learn to teach evangelism. Book 1 and 2. I keep mentioning 2 before, because if I had just written 1, I would have just written the 1 to do.
Okay.
But then I realized there was need to do 1 to help people to teach. But I must tell you a story about book 2. Before book 2 was finished, I had only the manuscripts. In other words, you see the colors and so on. And I had my phone earlier because I could actually show you the book on my phone. Right? I had all of these nice pages and so on. A pastor heard about the material, called me and said, I'm going to train my church. I'm not going to call his name, but he pastors one of the largest denomination, the church, one of the largest denomination. And he was the head of evangelism in this denomination. And he called me to come and train his members. He says he has launched some of the largest tent crusades in this country. And that year, he was not going to have a tent crusade. He is going to do personal evangelism as his evangelism. So I said to him, Bishop, we don't finish writing the book yet. I don't have the material to train. He says, you showed me in the PowerPoint conversation some pictures and so on. Bring that. Which equivalent? What was the equivalent of? Remember, tell you the first thing, My Little Soul Winner's book.
Yeah.
That is what I had. And so I went to his church, taught his church for 10 days. He told me this now. 50 members of his church in the communities that were surrounding his church. 10 days, 50 members. They brought back to him 475 names and numbers of persons they were able to share the gospel with in 10 days.
Yeah.
And he said to me, he has been launching tent for the longest while, and he has never seen such a response to anything. And out of that, we are now doing some work training his church and so on. I just trained a group of 17 or so, 17 to 20 church leaders, and they just graduated Thursday. And by this morning, one of them posted in the group, I'd asked them to get a list of 10 names that they're going to first evangelize. One of them messaged and says, my first person has made a decision. Can you imagine if we were to be able to get even 50% of the church? You know, kind of parable of the 5 wise and the 5 foolish virgins says you will have 5 people who will in half of the church. And they are able to train to do personal evangelism. Anywhere they go, to anybody, they can take up the phone and do this to somebody in their Jerusalems and their Samarias and their utmost parts of the world. Can you imagine the revolution that would happen in the world? Can you imagine if we could do this in prisons? Can you imagine if we, instead of waiting on the government to solve all the problems, we enlist ourselves? Can you imagine if we could present all of this to every single member of parliament, every single parish councillor, every single mayor across the length and breadth, every single police officer, every single person who holds those kind of office, permanent secretaries? The church can come together, and decide to do this.
Which is why, from what I've been hearing over for a little while, people been saying the church not doing anything.
And, it's kind of hard because remember I said earlier, the church has people who are sweetly saved and have committed their life to Christ and, really God-fearing, many of them. But what they need is a strategy. They need a tool. They need a training that will build capacity, not just to Christianize, to educate people. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, someplace around 2008 2009, had 3 encounters with Christian churches. One was the Coptic church in his region. The other he went to visit the Archbishop of Canterbury. And the third one, a group of evangelists were invited to be with him. So the man was searching. So we're not just talking about a local country. We're talking about if the church had the capacity to sit down and in a concise, systematic way impart the gospel to people, we would be well on our way to fulfilling the Great Commission of going to all the world and preach the gospel. But once people are saved, the church really does not have a sufficient program. So we have to wait until crusades come around, or Sunday morning church come around, where after Sunday morning, whatever members you have could be empowered to be going out there and doing the work of the Lord. So these materials are designed to build that capacity so that a church, as I said, is known not just for its seating capacity, but for its sending capacity. The gospel does not need to be proven that it has power, The gospel needs to be preached, to be proclaimed. And that is what is lacking. It has the power, but it needs the persons who are trained and willing. Many believers are just afraid.
Actually, at that question, Christian struggles with evangelism, going and speaking to others.
They struggle for a number of reasons. One, they're just afraid. I'm just saying straight up. That's why the Bible says God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and of power and of a sound mind. I've taught enough of them, hundreds of Christians across this country, so I know what I'm saying. Second thing is they do not know the gospel sufficiently to share it. They know sufficiently. I mean, I have a cell phone. I know it sufficiently to use it. Do I know it sufficiently to do everything it can do? No.
Yeah.
How many people? I have a car. I know it sufficiently to drive it. If it gets sick, do I know it sufficiently to repair it? I beg God, don't make nothing to it. Especially if I'm far, because I don't know that. So many persons do not know the gospel sufficiently to share it. But the crux of it is when people ask them questions, they're afraid that their questions they don't know how to answer. That's why they need this book. This book, each of them have a comprehensive chapter that deals with detours and distractions. So when I told you a while ago about those people who believe, how comes God is invisible? How can he be real? Book teaches you how to deal with that. Those people who believe that salvation can't be free, if it is free, can't be good. We have told you how to deal with that. The most objection normally come at the point when they are to make a decision. That is when people come up with the objection. The book comprehensively teaches the people how to avoid and to be humble, calm, respectful, but firm, and effectively deal with that. And even if they run you at the end, the book teaches you how to go back 5 times without feeling that you're boring people.
Mm-hmm.
That is a game changer. That's what actually the pastor with the 475 response says. This is a game changer for him. And that's why there's a certain Bible school now who has invited me to come to train. Actually, I've taught in one before from Montego Bay, and there's one now here that services the Caribbean that we're going to be training members. And I want people to come on board because it is something that everybody, in 2033 in Chad, we are going to be celebrating the big dawn of the third millennium of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ and the birth of the church. I believe that we have a mandate to give Jesus a present on the anniversary of his birthday, death, and resurrection day. What is that present? We should be sufficiently engaged in personal evangelism, his most prominent approach, that we can declare that year the year of personal evangelism.
Okay.
2033 ought to be declared the year of personal evangelism in honor of Jesus. And it cannot be so if we don't have the material and the kind of commitment, the metal to get out there and get the job done in the name of the Lord. And it is possible. The tools are here. And the reference to the tool from persons who have used it is enough to convince me that the Spirit of the Lord has equipped the church again with something that we can use to change the game so that the fear that has overtaken us, we can confront it and decide to get out there. A decision, to evangelize ultimately is a decision to die. And how I know that? Because in Ephesians 6, for example, it talks about the full armor of God. That means you're going into a battle.
Yeah.
Right? Your head must be covered with the helmet of salvation if you are going to evangelize. That means you must know you're saved. You must be confident. All of those things that the head does, the belief, the confidence, the consistent mindset. Then it spoke about the breastplate of righteousness. So you must be prepared to live a certain life. We cannot go out there and be talking about evangelism and we not doing the lifestyle. We must have our loins girded around with truth. That means that we must be integrity people. If we are fearful, we must admit it. If we need to study, we need to study. If we need to prepare, we need to be prepared. We are the true Jehovah's Witness in the church, right? Then it says, well, we must have the shield of faith in one hand, because there's no way we can do this without faith, and the sword of the Spirit, hence the book's picture, right, in the other hand. And then it says our feet must be shod with a desire to prepare ourselves. It's not just get up, go out there, talk, without prepare. Jesus would prepare his disciples before he sent them out. For a couple of years he had them teaching, and one of the time he said to Peter, who seemed to have been not a very good student, "Get thee behind me, Satan, the thing you're saying is not right." You know, and he became the leader of the church. So his head seemed to have been a little slow, but he did get it eventually. So we need that kind of a commitment to transform, to unite and to transform ourselves. What the church needs is a strategy, something. And the book actually narrows the strategy into a 12 set of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 steps strategy. That as you learn them, tick off 1, tick off 2, tick off 3. And the church is available to train them. Covenant Life Christian Church, that I know pastor, has a program through its evangelism ministry called School of Personal Evangelism.
Okay.
That is convened in our nice setting, like you come to school, but you don't need no special degree to be a student in the school. And the pastors can come to be trained to teach, and members can come to be trained to do the work of personal evangelism. People need to become soul winners, not just sweetly saved and sitting in the pew.
So, you said a lot. But I want to speak quickly about a bittersweet moment. The time when your car got stolen. And the sweet part of it, you got back the car with all your books in it. So you can speak about that.
It's like you call it bittersweet. So on the 1st of November last year, I was up. It was a Friday morning. I was up till 3 o'clock preparing sermon, and when I woke up on the 1st, so it was the 30th, I was up till in the 1st. When I woke up, my house was broken into. My car keys were stolen and my car was taken. And of course, I said, God, how are we going to do this now because of everything? But I thank God, my faith did not fail. I still had a passion. I had 100 books that I just purchased not so long before and had them in my car. Well, in Jamaica, about 1,500 cars are stolen annually, and about 5% is recovered. Yeah. Mine was one of those that was recovered. Thank God, it was found on unlikely places. And when I opened the car, believe it or not, it was almost like nothing was done, and the books are all there.
And the only thing that happened was the
door. Had to, because they didn't get back one of the keys. I decided that all good thing. I have a car, thank God, God has replaced my car. So then I found it back. I chose to change the key because the one that was stolen was still out there. So I wouldn't want that to be available to anybody. And there was a little thing with one of the handles to open the door. In fact, it appeared that they drove the car away, and by the same day, 2 o'clock the day, the car shut down with them and locked them out of it. And they couldn't get back in. So you could see where they were trying to get in. And so they just walked away, and a wrecker took it up and took it down to the pound at the KCC. So for a while they had stolen goods on their pound.
So like how long of a period?
About 2 months.
Whoa.
A friend of mine,
if 2 weeks pass normally and I get back in
that's what they said to me. A person who in complex that I live, whose car was taken up, went down to the pound and saw my car and said to me, sent a message and says, I think I know where your car is. I said, you're joking. He says, no, I'm looking at it right now. Send me 2 pictures. It was down at the pound. So, of course, I went down there and the parish council wanted to charge me for the storage. Of course, I called my brother, Bishop Osborne Bailey. I called him and he called the parish council. And I've never seen such a quick response, from anybody. All of a sudden, they don't want to charge me the fee anymore. So
Well, that kind of
I was
weird.
able to drive with my car.
Well, that kind of weird though. You charge somebody. It's not like they impound the car. It was stolen.
The car was stolen. So they had stolen goods. So if I had stolen goods on my property, the people should pay to come and correct it. No. So quite rightly, he put his foot down and we were able to recover the car without paying that money.
Yes, so we arrive at the end of the interview, but before we end, we normally do a quick game. And this game is called Rapid Fire Redemption and Evangelism Edition.
All right.
All right. So, all right, sir, before we wrap up, it's time for a quick game.
Yes,
Rapid
sir.
Fire. First thing comes to mind. First thing that comes to your mind.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Most rewarding moment in your ministry.
In my ministry, first rewarding moment is the day I heard a call to come to Bible school.
All right. One scripture that anchor your position for evangelism.
I still love John 3:16 because I can use that to preach the whole thing. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. It tells me about God. It tells me about man's condition. It tells me about Christ's work on the cross. It tells me about the plan of salvation, which is free. And it tells me that I need to make a decision. So John 3:16 for a reason.
And that's from the book.
Yeah, it is in the book. Yes.
All right. The hardest decision you ever had to make?
The hardest decision that I constantly make is when I have to face persons to convince them that the way of personal evangelism is the way to go. And it's not hard to make, it still have to make, because we still have a large percentage of the church who are not convinced that they should go. That they should be a part of the going people, putting back the go in the gospel. So it's very hard when I have to call to try to convince people. It's really like, here we go again.
So simply saying is like going into all the world, preach the gospel, or the part that you should become fishers of men.
You should become fishers of men, and they really are afraid. So to convince people to jump off that cliff is not easy.
One thing every believer should remember about evangelism.
That if persons are not saved or loving family members, there is an eternity that is waiting. That we have to urgently cause them and lovingly cause them to know that time is running out on them.
One person you credit for helping your change in your life.
You know what I'm going to say, right? my dad, my mother. So, for example, book 1 is dedicated to her. So in the section that speak to that, I spoke to it that the book is dedicated to her.
All right. One word to describe your life before Christ and one word describe it now.
I would say before Christ, my life was reckless. I would say after Christ, my life is passionate about purpose.
All right.
So that's 2 words, right?
All right, so that's the end of the rapid fire question. So the quote of the day is, your past may explain you, but it does not define you. Redemption rewrite every story.
Amen. Amen.
So guys, make sure you check out the book whether you're new to the faith or you've been walking the road for years. Sir Osborne Bailey's insight will challenge you to become a bold messenger of hope. So guys, the book is available on Amazon or you can get it in physical copy. So guys, you can call this number 876-793-3393. This was an awesome podcast, and remember to like, share, subscribe. See you guys next time.
Open Chxt Podcast.